Welcome back to Storytime. In today's episode, we're going to be continuing our reading of Machines and Men, but before we jump into it, just a quick reminder. You can follow us both here on YouTube and also on our other social media platforms, including at r/Creant World on Reddit, which is where you can submit stories for our consideration. And now, sit on back and relax, and we will get into today's chapter of Machines and Men. Chapter 13, The Iron Heart. The days passed with increasing slowness for Stephen. He became conscious of a sick feeling in his stomach whenever he found Vera smiling at him, which happened frequently. The fact that she was obviously unaware of his inner turmoil only served to make things worse. Stephen felt like he was living a lie. He wanted to love Vera, wanted to be devoted to her, but the more time he spent with her, the more he began to see the subtle differences that separated her from a true human. She was an excellent simulation of a human, but a simulation nonetheless. There was no personality, no spunk, nothing that made her an individual. Vera seemed to be motivated only to do things that she thought would please him, because that was how she was programmed. But in an attempt to make her more appealing, it actually decreased her humanity. No one was really this thoughtful, this kind, this unfailingly loyal. It sort of took Stephen out of the fantasy he was finding now. That's not to say it didn't appreciate her efforts, but it had a bitter taste in his mouth to know that it had come at the expense of her personality. Once again, he found himself thinking of what Meg told him the day of the rally. Robots had no soul. He had never really understood what a soul was before, but he thought he did now. As far as Stephen was concerned, the soul was the spark that made things alive, not merely animate. Vera was not alive. Oh, she seemed alive, acted alive, passed for being alive, but she was not. She could never live. Vera could never enjoy something simply for the sake of enjoying it. He could teach her to study art, but she could never form an opinion about what made a piece good or bad. She could never have a gut feeling, experience instinct, or make snap decisions. Her brain operated on mathematical probabilities and statistical outcomes, not the sort of hardwired feelings that humans ran on. In many ways, the positronic brain was very similar to the human brain. It had been modeled in the same way, worked in a similar manner mechanically, but positronic brains saw the world differently. One evening, Stephen and Vera had been walking hand in hand when they reached a prominent outlook. Stephen had asked Vera what she thought of the sunset. It was a truly gorgeous sunset, which lit up the sky in a myriad of colors. "It's beautiful," Vera had said after a moment of contemplation. "Why?" Stephen asked her softly. "What makes it beautiful?" "The colors are very vibrant and saturated," Vera said uncertainly. "Don't you think it's beautiful?" That was when Stephen realized that Vera truly had no conception of beauty on her own. She was simply trying to mirror his feelings. It was a bit much, Stephen supposed, to expect a robot to understand the idea of wabi-sabi, that there were simple inherent beauty in things that were impermanent and that would fade and pass with time. A gnarled, twisted branch of a tree might be oddly shaped and bent, but it still held a certain beauty of its own. But to Vera, it would always be just a gnarled branch, and nothing more. Her mind was rooted firmly in facts and calculations, not in feelings or impressions. Once he had asked her to draw a beautiful face, and she had sat there for several minutes unable to draw anything. When she finally did pick up her pencil and begin to draw, the face which resulted, though flawlessly rendered in every detail, was a very generic face. When Stephen had asked Vera why she had drawn the face she had, she explained hesitantly that all the proportions were geometrically ideal, based on the golden ratio. She had gone on to explain that statistically the most beautiful people in the world have faces that fit within this model. Facts. But human brains work differently, as Stephen knew from personal experience. He had started with the exact same face that Vera had just drawn when he had been designing her, but he had deliberately changed something. That was the difference between robots and people. A robot could never understand why you would never do something the best you could, or why you could be happy with something that was less than perfect. When robots made decisions, they decided on a course of action which was most likely to work, and then acted on it with the right amount of effort required for the task. When Stephen had watched Vera run through the list he had given her and perform all the tasks, She had explained to him exactly what she was doing in order to get the desired result. It was all focused, deliberate precision. When they had gone to the gun range together, Vera had hit the center of the bullseye every time with her robotic eyes, calculating brain, and exact control over her body. It was impossible for her not to. Vera couldn't make mistakes. She was able to control her movements with the same ease and precision while breakdancing as while walking. She could perch and balance on the narrowest railings with the same grace and ease of a cat because she had direct control over her balance and was so much more aware of her body and how it worked than any human could ever be. Stephen prided himself on his batting abilities, but Vera outstripped him with ease. Not because she was more intuitive than he was, but because she could track the ball with far greater accuracy, calculate its trajectory and flight path in a second, and then adjust herself and her bat position accordingly. Speed, angle, spin, wind resistance, and a million other factors were all known and accounted for. It was simply mathematically impossible for Vera to miss. But Stephen noticed that Vera deliberately pulled her punches. Whenever she would play against Andy and himself in video games, Vera always let them win, if only by the slimmest margin. Stephen supposed that this must have something to do with her Asimovian laws hardwired into Vera's positronic brain. She seemed to realize that to beat Stephen or Andy at video games that they had been playing for years after a scant few minutes of study would certainly bruise their male egos. It would, in short, cause harm, psychologically anyway. When Vera played against the computer, though, she was absolutely merciless. She played at 100%, which was considerable. During one game session, Stephen had paired Vera off against one of his amiibo figures in a game of Smash Bros. Amiibos had been consistently updated since their inception. Nintendo had promised a CPU that could learn from watching you, and that you could teach how to fight. But what they had originally delivered was a CPU that hit harder, took less damage, moved a bit faster than regular CPUs in the game, but wasn't really any better. Public outcry at this, coupled with advancements in AI technology, eventually brought about the amiibo that Stephen's generation had grown up with. These versions really could learn from watching you fight, and really were trained in various moves by watching you. Putting an amiibo in fights against many people pretty well guaranteed that no human could beat them. And pretty soon, amiibo became little more than robotic cockfighters. Stephen's amiibos were at such a skill level through hours of relentless training that they had placed in the semifinals at the national championships. But the simple AI of the amiibos had never met a higher AI of the caliber of Vera before. Vera beat the amiibos with apparent ease the first couple of times, but after that it had gotten harder and harder for her to win. The two robots became locked in a battle of adaptation, each learning from and trying to defeat the other. Stephen had watched in wide-eyed astonishment as Vera and the amiibos' battle became more and more pitched. Both of them were inhibited only by the limits of the game, and it showed. With the precision and flawless timing with which they executed moves, it was very rare for either opponent to so much as land a hit without it being predicted and dodged accordingly. The final battle between Vera and the amiibo lasted for more than 45 minutes, and ended only because the controller that Vera had been using had malfunctioned under the intensity with which Vera had played, causing a button to stick. The whole episode had highlighted the real power that Vera controlled. Her speed and timing had been perfect. She had played at a level that no human could have ever played at, against an AI that already had been battle-hardened. Vera always gave everything she did her best shot, which was considerable, and the only reason that she ever failed was because of some factor beyond her control. Yet still, with all that power and control at her disposal, Stephen beat her every time, because she let him win. There was no doubt in Stephen's mind that if Vera were to take the game seriously, she would destroy him. But she never did. It sort of left a bad taste in his mouth. Winning like that is hardly winning at all. In time, the obvious perfection and ease with which Vera did things began to grate on Stephen's nerves. He had brought it on himself, he knew. After all, he had been the one to tell Vera to learn tasks that he was good at so that they could do it together. He hadn't reckoned on how irksome it would be to be around someone who was so much better at the things that had taken him years to master after only a few minutes. Stephen knew it wasn't Vera's fault, that she wasn't trying to show off or anything. All she wanted was to please him. He likewise knew that because of her first law protocols, if he brought this up to her, she would think it was hurting him emotionally and be really distressed as a result. He muscled on in silence for a while, but it didn't stop him from being upset about it. Stephen began to seek out the company of real humans more and more often in the coming days and weeks. He would spend more time at Andy's house, stay later and later at work, and come up with excuses that he could spend more time away for Vera. He still really liked Vera, but her perfection was really starting to annoy him in a powerful and obscure way. Vera never complained. She bore the abandonment with cheerful acceptance, though she made it clear that she missed him while he was out. Stephen didn't know how to tell Vera that the problem was that she wasn't doing anything wrong. It was that she was doing everything right. Stephen ached for Vera to just make a mistake, to forget something, to screw something up. To err was human, after all. But then again, Vera wasn't human, and that was the whole problem. Perhaps what happened was inevitable, given the circumstances. Thoughts and emotions can only be bottled up for so long before something gives way. In Stephen's case, it happened one day when he was deliberately lingering at work, not wanting to go home. Meg stuck her head into his cubicle and knocked on the side. "Hey, Stephen," she greeted him, a blush already beginning to tinge her face. "Some of my friends and I are thinking about going clubbing tonight for my sister's birthday. I was wondering if you'd like to come with, if you don't have anything else planned for tonight, you know." "Will there be copious amounts of alcohol and loud dubstep?" he asked, grinning. "Probably," Meg answered with a laugh. "Well then, shit, yes. Just let me make a call. I'll be right with you." Meg grinned, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, and withdrew. Stephen picked up the phone and called his house number. It rang a few times before Vera answered. Her initially hesitant voice perked up right away when she heard him speak, though. He told her he was going to hang out with friends and he wasn't sure what time he would be home, but not to worry. She said that would be fine, though he heard a note of despondency in her voice, and Stephen hung up. Vera was passively smothering him with her never-ceasing devotion. Stephen was certain that if he had made a call like that to any of his previous girlfriends, they would have been justly pissed. But Vera had only seemed disappointed that he wasn't coming home. He felt more than a little guilty leaving her alone like this, but he pushed those thoughts aside. After all, he was going to be around real people, have real interactions, and that was worth a bit of loneliness. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed that episode, go ahead and hit that like button. And if you'd like more content like this, go ahead and subscribe for more videos every week. You can also follow us on our social media platforms at r/CreantWorld on Reddit, where you can submit stories for Storytime to be read out loud. Until next time, see you later.